All right, my English teacher friends. So I have another one of my writing workshops that I entitle Hammering Home the Thesis, where we take Oscar-nominated short films to solidify how to write the introductory paragraphs for FRQ1 and FRQ2 for the AP Literature and Composition exam. So, for my fellow teachers that are not teaching AP Lit and Comp, this is fine. It works just perfectly well, my template for all literary analysis. So, whether or not you're doing poetry or prose, novels, plays, anything that's literary analysis, this is how I construct the thesis using my templates, but I'm gearing this more towards AP literature and composition writing workshop than non-AP, but it'll work nonetheless. So just for context, one of the questions I'm asked is, do I have a traditional bell schedule or am I on a block? And I am on a block, and we have 86-minute periods. So typically what I do to prepare for the grueling marathon of writing 3 essays in under 2 hours is I'll show two short films, and the ones I choose are typically under 5 minutes, as is the case of The Bread here by Gulu. So we watch it, and I have my students crank their intros in one block. So we usually do 2 shorts once the academic year progresses and we're racing against the clock. But early in the academic year, I'm just doing one film at a time and doing a lot of Bob Rossing and modeling and giving exemplars and things of that nature. So given that it's early in the academic year, I just did The Bread in one class period. I wrote 4 introductions myself and then had students just kind of mimic me so that they could get a sense of how to do the template. So with that, let's dive right in. As always, I ask the question, what if we taught composition like Bob Ross teaches painting? And here's what I mean by that. Right, there's a huge seismic difference between the assigning of writing and the teaching of writing. It's very easy to show this short film and say, all right, class, we're going to watch The Bread, and then you're going to write an introduction about it, right? That's assigning. When I work with teachers, I always tell them and encourage them to position themselves as the expert writer in the classroom and to paint with your students. So to say, all right, we're doing literary analysis. We know that we have to invert the thesis. I wrote 3 inverted theses for you. Here's 1, 2, and 3. Demystify it and say, on your mark, get set, go, do it on your own. And it really sort of elucidates the process for students. And then as the academic year progresses, you Bob Ross less and less and less. You remove the scaffold, you kick off the training wheels. And something I always tell my teachers that take my mastermind or when I do PD in districts and things of that nature is I cease to be the Bob Ross of composition as of March 1st, especially in my AP classes, because we're about 2 months away from taking the exam. And I only model if I absolutely need to after March 1st. But I find that I really don't need to model all that much, maybe for individual students, but whole class, I really cease to paint with them and have them work towards their own independence. So let's dive right in. The first question we need to ask ourselves is this for this writing workshop. How do I construct the introductory paragraph? And with my templates, you have 2 options. You can declare or invert. For time's sake, I'm just going to skip ahead because I'm assuming most of you are familiar with my work by now. And if not, you can go into my YouTube channel and do a deep dive into my other Oscar-nominated shorts where I go into this more in detail. But in terms of declaring or inverting, we declare always for rhetorical analysis, and we invert always for literary analysis. And then in terms of the other expository modes, such as argument, persuasion, synthesis, and research, it's a 50-50 coin flip. So you can declare or invert, and it's usually contingent upon the phrasing of the essential question or the prompt. And again, I have a ton of stuff in my YouTube channel for that. So regardless of prompts, whether it be for rhetorical analysis, so FRQ2 for the AP Lang exam, or FRQ1 and FRQ2 for the AP Literature exam, I have found that implicit in every prompt are two essential questions. What is the authorial intent? And how does the author construct meaning? Now, in terms of structuring this in the inverted triangle, let's skip to that. What you're going to do is take 3 sentences and answer the question, what is the authorial intent? Right, that's the context and background. So don't get plot summative, don't quote, don't make it read like a Cliff Note summation. Just what is the authorial intent? And then the 4th sentence is going to answer the question, how does the author construct meaning? And that's where you're going to drop your literary terms and devices, which is going to constitute and comprise the thesis statement. So it's a straight up inverted where you end with the thesis. So let's go through this from top to bottom. So you end with the thesis, 3 sentences authorial intent, 1 sentence construction of meaning, sprinkle in the context and background, and then tier 2 and sentence constructs get into something that I do in my Teach It Right 5-week mastermind, my self-paced courses, and some of my professional developments. So I do something with my students, all of my students, regardless of grade level, that I call the Word Study Academy. And I do it all academic year long. So in my 20 plus years in the classroom, I have found that there's just this abysmal vocabulary void each and every subsequent year. So one of the things I need to do is fill that void. So I do intensive word study with my students, and I go over all of this stuff in my Word Study Academy. But by tier 2 level vocabulary, I mean your average run-of-the-mill SAT level words. So I want students to sound academic, but not overly geeked out. I don't want them to sound pretentious, contrived. I don't want them misusing words or inventing words. I want them to stay in their wheelhouse. So this is a delicate balance of keeping it academic, so in tier 2 territory, but also to use a little bit of colloquial and vernacular. I think to get that elusive sophistication point, that needs to be teeter-totter balanced, the colloquial, the vernacular, and the academic. And then in my Nuance Academy, we talk about sentence constructs. So Strunk and White, in their seminal text called Write It Right, assert that there's 12 different ways to construct a single sentence. So you'll see my students try to aim to get voice, rhythm, and flow by manipulating their syntax. So my students can do all sorts of tricks with regards to their punctuation, their syntax, in the hopes of achieving voice, rhythm, and flow. So they have quite expressive syntactical approaches in their at the sentence level. And then, as always, every introduction is going to be 4 sentences long. So 3 sentences authorial intent, 1 sentence construction of meaning. By extension of doing that, you're going to sprinkle in context and background, get your tier 2 level vocab in there, focus on those sentence constructs so that you're not being redundant and you don't have a droning tone, in exactly 4 sentences. So let's dive in and take a look at a couple for the bread. I really like this short film, especially given what the College Board gave, with regards to the octopus passage in 2022. This is definitely an allegorical film. It's an allegorical representation. So before I get into doing any test prep, especially with that octopus piece, I like to do a few allegorical short films, and I have a number in my YouTube channel, and this just happens to be one of them. So let's begin. 3 sentences authorial intent, bottom sentence, construction of meaning, where we're going to drop our terms. So one thing that teachers often say is, what's the universal theme? What's the universal truth? What's the exigence? However you want to cloak and phrase it is to your own discretion. I just call it authorial intent. So let's see what a student did here. As morbid as it may sound, most humans spend much of life running away from the inevitability of death, right? And that's like kind of the whole thing. That's Gulu's point, right? Even though man knows that the one certainty of life is death, there's little comfort in this knowledge. In fact, especially for those lives not rooted in spiritual principles, one's life can easily get consumed by fear-based thinking that refuses to accept the laws governing fate. So we're 3 sentences in, hit me with the terms and devices. And here you focus on, like, you don't want it to be a literary terms dumping ground. So I tell my guys, focus like on the 2 most salient terms in the piece. And in the movie, through our Socratic seminars, we decided it was irony and allegory. So all of my students are going to be saying pretty much the same thesis. Gulu highlights this strange irony allegorically in his short film, The Bread. So you just sort of preface what you're going to be talking about in your body paragraphs by dropping your terms and devices in the last sentence that answers the question, how does the author construct meaning? So it's always 3 plus 1. So note the sentence constructs here. Very well done. I like this. In fact, comma, especially for those lives not rooted in spiritual principles, comma. So good use of parentheticals, adjective clauses, gerunds, it's all good. So the vocab is up, but not overinflated. It doesn't sound pretentious. It doesn't sound contrived. It sounds like this kid is in total possession and control of this thesis statement in this introductory paragraph. So out of the gate, I think they're off to a blazing good start, and they're definitely going to get the thesis point. So here's another one, going to follow that 3 plus 1 paradigm. 3, authorial intent. 1, construction of meaning. Focus on the tier 2, focus on the sentence constructs, always 4 sentences. Human behavior tends to preclude man from living and existing in the present moment. So again, always like begin with the aha, what's the universal truth? What's the authorial intent? What's the purpose here? Why did Gulu make this piece? What's he trying to get? What's his thesis? What's he driving home? So instead, man is either dwelling in the past or catastrophizing the future. Often is the case, especially when individuals lack faith in a higher power, their projections into the future are enshrouded by the fears of worst-case scenarios. Gulu illustrates this ironic interplay allegorically in a short film entitled The Bread. So always drop the terms and devices in that last sentence, construction of meaning. Straight up inverted thesis. Hit me with the thesis statement last. Vocab's nice, enshrouded, projections, dwelling. So good vocab, catastrophizing. And again, you have like some really nice supple sentences in here. Often is the case, comma, especially when individuals lack faith in a higher power, comma, their projections into the future are enshrouded by the fears of worst case scenarios. So notice my students don't parallel their sentences, right? So I tell them, if you've used a sentence construct, say in the 3rd sentence, your 4th sentence probably doesn't want to parallel 3, and 2 doesn't want to parallel 1. Otherwise, you develop that droning da-dot, 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 da-dot. And struggling and emerging writers tend to overuse independent clauses or the short, simple declarative sentence. So getting into your own little nuance academy where you teach your students those 12 different sentence constructs is really key. And that's a staple of my Teach It Right 5-week mastermind. We really ensure that students know those sentence constructs and can, develop some ways to, have expressive syntax and have purpose with their punctuation. So here's student number 3. Start with what is the authorial intent. So why did Gulu make this film? An incontrovertible truth is that life requires death. The two cannot exist separately. Given that man is part and parcel of the animal kingdom, we must kill life to sustain our own lives. Whether it be chicken, cow, chickpeas, or even bread, death preserves life. Gulu depicts this cruel irony allegorically in a short film entitled The Bread. Every single kid is following the same template. And I've had teachers in the past, AP teachers, say, I just want my students writing the one sentence introduction. This would be an interesting case study. How many students that write the one sentence bag or introduction get the elusive sophistication point? I'm going to go out on a gambit here and say very few. I think it's like you make your first impression with the introduction, and I think my students are doing a really good job here. They're showing their chops with their sentence constructs, their vocabulary, the colloquial, the vernacular, the academic, and then they're reading the film correctly. All right, they're ascertaining its meaning. And all of those things factor into the sophistication point. And I think it's really crucial that the introduction be fleshed out and not a literary terms dumping ground, which we often see in introductions with the College Board sample papers. Here's number 4, going to be done the exact same way. Student number 4, 3 sentences, authorial intent, 1 sentence, construction of meaning. For those of us who do not believe in the likes of higher consciousness and the afterlife, life can be a rather scary proposition. And again, always the aha, why did Gulu make this? Given that the only certainty to life is death itself, if one does not have a foundation built upon spiritual principles, fear will most likely predominate. Not being endowed with foresight, all of this uncertainty can really stymie a person. So we're 3 sentences in, shift construction of meaning, drop the terms. Gulu highlights this theme through the allegorical depiction of bread being bought and consumed. And that's it. Always 3 + 1. Look at the vocab in here. Consciousness, predominate, spiritual principles, foundation, allegorical depiction, right? Stymie. So, and then all the sentence constructs are nice and supple, flowy, and, not running parallel to each other. There's no redundancies in the syntax. So that's how I advise my students to do introductory paragraphs for FRQ1 and FRQ2 for AP Lit. But even if I'm doing like an on-level 9th grade course or 10th grade course, 11th grade course, 12th grade course, this is exactly the template I would use for literary analysis across the board. So I teach at the college and university level and often do 105 classes, which is Introduction to Literature. And I use this template, at the college level as well. So if you got questions or want to try your hand at Bob Rossing some of your own samples, feel free to reach out, teachingwritingcoach@gmail.com. I can also pass the slides on to you. Also note that my Teach It Right 5-week mastermind is now being hosted by the National Writing Project. So it's a 5-hour course. We meet Sunday nights from 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for 5 consecutive weeks. But here's the kicker. NWP is giving a badge, a PD badge of 10 completion hours. So for 5 hours of your time, you get 10-hour badge, which is perfect for those needing PD hours. And if you want more information on my courses at the National Writing Project, I have that Teach It Right 5-week mastermind. We're also cobbling together a self-paced course because it's clear that a lot of teachers, we're busy, are looking for a self-paced course. So that's going to be offered as well. And then I have some smaller workshops that are coming up over the academic year, like my alternative grading methods and my teaching line of reasoning course. So stay tuned for that. I'll keep the groups abreast and of our developments and the irons that we have in the fire. So teachingwritingcoach@gmail.com or www.teachinghowtowrite.com is my website, and you can get information on my comings and goings there. So be well for now. Happy teaching, happy writing.